Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. Very happy to see your faces, or in the case of Jim, see him working on his vehicle. I, I love the presentation. All right, so what will be presented today is a concept that has been in development amongst a core group that I have been working with for several years now, about 6, I believe. And we are called the Project Township. We are currently being hosted on the Liminal Commons by Victor. We are coming off of a presentation prior, not so much a presentation, but a circled dialogos around the concept of establishing a digital commons. So this presentation and the concept in it are intended to be hosted on the Liminal Commons over time, which is why I bring it up as a potential project that can be scaled across as many groups as wish to participate in it. I'm going to thank you. All right. So to begin with, the title of this presentation was iGame, holding space for an emergent meta. I want to note that in the following, there's not going to be a proposition for a specific system, a specific top-down prescription. Holding space was chosen with care to say that it appears to me and those who I work with that there is a shift occurring on a global scale, and that in that we developed language by which to make it more accessible for us. And in that, we're noticing all of these correlations between other individuals who are in the space, who are working on gaming and are looking at society from this gaming lens. So this is an invitation for them to come and join the conversation with us so that we can hold space for what is already potentially occurring and perhaps participate in the emergence as it comes. To kick this off, I'm going to be introducing an analogy taken from modern video gaming, which is the idea of a meta. We're all probably pretty familiar with using meta in a variety of contexts. This has a very particular application though. As it is in modern video games, many of them are based off of a subscription plan in which you are subscribing to the game as a service, in which it is continually updated by the developers over time. And every time the update comes out, there is a reprioritization of how to play the game effectively. New strategies emerge, and eventually players begin to find exploits within the meta as it is, which leads to the developers coming up with a new update. And so there's this sort of dialectical feedback that occurs over time. But as the meta shifts, and as the best strategies and best practices by which to show up and be effective and to thrive within the ecology develop and adapt, so too does the entire system gain in complexification as it goes. And so the analogy here is to look at society from this lens, to look at where we are and where we have been as a preceding meta, preceding defining set of concepts by which the participants in society look to and make their personal choices by how to be effective within the social system as it is. It appears that there is a shift, there's a paradigm emerging in this meta to be a new meta in which there are new strategies emerging and new player opportunities. I'm going to be as generic as possible when referring to the old meta. This is not meant to be a political analysis so much as an identification that there's a category that precedes. There's potentially a category to follow. So I'm referred to the old meta as just the old school. And I have a couple of identifying characteristics, which I will get to in a moment. And the potential emerging meta referred to as the iGame, which I will discuss. So in the meta concept in gaming, as noted, there's this perpetual recursive emergent complexity that is going on. But it's not necessarily that the players have really any stake in how that development occurs. Sure, the developers are responding to exploits that they see, but the players don't really get to decide what happens. And oftentimes they're quite unsatisfied with the developments and the updates as they are released, leading them to want to exploit it and to have individualistic competitive outcomes as a consequence. In this new meta, the idea is to remove the duality of player-developer and to look at all players as developers, as having a stake in the outcome and in the developmental process. In fact, to look at it as development through play. Like, we are developers and we're players, and the game develops through how we show up, how we embody our strategies, and what becomes most effective in this new landscape. The iGame as a concept is derived from a book by James Carse, in which he introduces infinite games and finite games as categories by which to look at social activities. Infinite games, well, let me start with finite games. Finite games are bounded activities that have a set number of steps you can take before you come to a conclusion, and that they are meant to be game theoretically oriented upon optimizing outcome for the individual. And they are competitive in their strategy. The infinite game, as per Carse, is definitively about playing the game for the purpose of continuing playing the game. So we want this game to be sustainable for all participants. And we want to play in such a way that we can iteratively adapt our play to be the most generative for all individuals within it. And so in our adaptation of the infinite game concept, we are shortening that to an iGame, infinite game, but it's also intended to be inclusive of the finite games that individuals play within it, because that's inescapable. We are finite beings in our material sense, and we are part of this infinite game process. So in that, the idea of the iGame is meant to scale from the individual through the communal, societal, and up to a global level. And the idea at this point, that if this meta shift is to occur, that it begins with a concerted inquiry and finding how the individuals are showing up with these personalized visions, these personalized methodologies of being present in their world, and then trying to harmonically integrate these. Well, not trying, rather discovering if there are harmonic opportunities for harmonic integration to occur. And from that, to hold space for the meta to emerge. May we go to the next slide, please? In this is just a very brief overview of the potential approach to doing the iGame at scale, in which I note for the levels, the individual, the communal, the societal, and the global. In this, at the top of each category are the challenges to engaging in just life in general at these variety of scales. There's so many more challenges than what I've noted for. This is purely a demonstrative example of how this could be approached. And for instance, in the individual level, we have personal resistance, i.e., what are the barriers to my growth and my development that I'm experiencing in my day-to-day life? Digital distractions, phone, doom scroll, Facebook, et cetera. That ties in to personal resistance. Identity fixation. I am locked into this one paradigm of who I am that is defined within this finite game sort of perspective. Thank you, Victor. And this, of course, just cascades on up the line to, say, identity politics that we're experiencing on a societal level, and a fixation on fitting into clearly delineated categories of me versus you versus them. So the iGame application for this individual level is tracking systems, ecologies of micro practices, doing playful identity games that allow me to step out of my box and to see things from a new perspective, but also to bring those back to my centrality and develop through creative discipline. The example here on the very bottom, War of Art, is a book by Stephen Pressfield that is about the creative journey. in which a person aligns with their resistance and moves through their resistance until their resistance becomes a feature of the play rather than a bug, becomes generative in their creative outcomes. Now, of course, that's very general. There are much more bespoke, technically precise examples that I could go into, but for the purpose of this presentation, we'll be foregoing for now. So as we look across the levels, we see that the challenges are just scaling, that when we move to the communal, then there's consensus barriers. What are the things that are the obstacles to us coming into alignment, into agreement? And how do we circumnavigate those? What traditions are we anchoring into that determine our identity fixations? Do echo chambers emerge as we move into these centralized categories of identity, and we only really speak with others who have the same identity structure as we do? Well, as you can see, there's iGame applications for this as well. Right? You can gamify the decision-making process. We can arrange it in such a way that we interact iteratively to come to a consensus. It takes a concerted desire, however, to want that and to play until we come to a consilience, to a stable alignment between us. And this can be most effectively amplified through cross-community exchange. Like, we can run an iGame, you can run an iGame, we're in the same iGame, even though we're not in the same box. If we start to scale it up to the societal level of like, okay, what is the meta that aligns us, that bridges us? And potentially the iGame of cooperative, collaborative, co-creative endeavors that lead to regenerativity and sustainable outcomes for all. One of my favorites is collective rituals, like the development of ritualistic practices and symbolic interfaces that are deeply embedded into the warm data of the people participating in the iGame on the local level. That instead of following traditions from 1,000 years ago as our top-down prescription, we're alive now. Like, can we bring the past with us in such a way that it doesn't negate our individual experience in the moment and of the living community that we are a part of? An example for this, community game design for meaning making, something that is being done in the Liminal and Mimicon quite a bit, and here in the Liminal Commons. An example of community game design for meaning making would be the glass bead game that is being hosted by Eric and Captain Future and a variety of other individuals I'm aware of, which is a simple, authentic human relating game in which you choose a topic and you do a round table practice of active listening and authentic expression and then cross correlation between them. And so there's a variety of skills in communication and of ability to receive others' meanings on a deeply personal level. And this is just an iterative game that the value of the play is the value of the play. You get a deep sense of being heard and of hearing and of consilience with those you are participating with. And so this scales up again to the societal level. And I'm probably not going to go through every single one of these. I'm just trying to illustrate how we can look at taking it from the individual games I just played by myself throughout my day to games I would play with you in this communal, up to this societal box. Like, well, this is the game all of us within the society are playing, to then looking to the global. Well, there's multiple societies. There's multiple different areas that are doing this gaming practice amongst themselves. How can they correlate? How can they find consilience? How can they come to commonality in such a way that honors the personal existence of all the participants? We run into a tragedy of the commons scenario up there at the global, and that scales all the way down to the bottom in just our personal relations, in which by approaching from this old school perspective on, well, it's just me and my outcomes that matter, and thus the commons suffers as a consequence because I'm more concerned with my outcome than upon the collective outcomes. And so again, I'm not going to go through every single point of note on here. Again, this is just to open the door for further discussion about this. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right. Now that the formal stuff's out of the way, here's the proposition. As noted, this concept has been in development amongst the group I'm a part of, which is Project Township. We have different exemplaries in our group, individuals who are very skilled in particular perspectives and approaches. Our game master, Jim, here, who is currently sitting out because he has some parental responsibilities, is the one who is most suited to having the perspective of how game design in a very practical sense factors into the approaching it as a societal, communal driven game. And so for future reference, he will be present for any of these discussions. So the proposition is this, like we're here, we're a part of the Liminal Commons, and we are seeking to do things with other people that are present. We're hoping to found a guild of the iGame. And that would be anyone who is interested in pursuing the production of games, from board games, card games, sociotech games, digital games, that want to make a product to distribute. Very particularly if these products are focused upon community, society, individual change, development, transformation, plugging into more authentic experiences with ourselves and regenerative relationships. And to begin, as I begin, the iGame is a placeholder attractor. It's just a point to a potential attractor that we might share. And from there to come together to see if we can develop something that works well for all of us. If the iGame becomes the thing that works for everyone, then that will be dealt with at that time. I just want to really highlight that it is not, we're not proposing that is the answer to this question, rather that it is a point of entry to us developing a conciliant answer between us. My presentation, there it is. And so the goal from here is to develop a community, right? Develop a guild of people who've got personal projects or want to plug into another project or want to co-develop a project, and then start to build from the bottom up, following the common attractors that we've identified as a means of top-down alignment. So there's no top-down prescription occurring here. It's a decentralization of pursuit of these interests, but with a solid foundation for us to all elevate our game together, hopefully upon this Liminal Commons. And that from there, develop the guild into specific areas on the maps that are focused upon different aspects of game development and of game implementation. For instance, there's several people I've met that are developing card games or developing computer games or board games, just here at Limicon and in the Liminal Commons. I went to one this morning that was from one of our project members, Matthew, developing something called the Garden Game, which is a card game that can be played digitally or on a tabletop that is about human connection in the pursuit of personal and common truths, and how to work through our issues with communication and disparate perspectives. And as we played this out, there's a development of dialogue trees that are visually represented and built through the interaction. Another individual, Beto, entered and started to watch and was like, whoa, I am working on my computer game to insert dialogue trees about societal change, like how to interact with people in such a way that leads to outcomes and social regenerativity. I need dialogue trees that aren't things that I came up with by myself. And so it became an opportunity to take the dialogue trees made in one game and port them right on over into Beto's game, so that he's got these more organic, like actually fleshed out dialogue trees from a variety of different perspectives and an ongoing output into his game. So just an example of how we can be generative by working together in these developments. I thought it was a very, very powerful move in general. And so the hope is that we want to provide space and like a commitment to aiding each other in playtesting, critique, and research and development of our personal projects, products, and again, co-created products as well. And so as noted in the product development aspect, board games, card games, sociotech games such as the glass bead game or circling is, I would put that right in there with authentic human relating games, digital platforms, and whatever other aspect of game could be considered within that category. And on the social implementation category, well, we're the game. That's the concept of the iGame, is that we are it, right? It is happening on a cosmic scale, and that we are already participating in it up to the degree that we are participating with each other to be it. And so the idea is to develop the template by which other communities might adapt and adopt it to be fit to their circumstances. And then how can we attain cross-platform integration? This is another analogy to modern video games, in which you have people on Xbox, PlayStation, and computers playing the same game at the same time with each other across all the different platforms, which traditionally, these were siloed. They were monocultural. You could only play Xbox games on Xbox. You could only play PlayStation on PlayStation, only computer on computer. Now, there is this cross-platform integration, which is a very powerful opportunity both here at the Liminal Commons and in the Guild of the iGame for us to start to getting these things working together and informing each other and elevating each individual platform not as a sacrifice of a collective good. And there's, I'd say, a deeper opportunity with this Gather Town interface. For those who are familiar with it, it is a video game interface. It is in a traditional like 16-bit graphical display. And you move your avatar across a map. And as you go, there's different embedded affordances into different areas that amplify the resonance of what you're seeking to do there. So we could just build games that involve the whole map, that people could be going from area to area to area to area and substantiating a flow between these things that lead to the development of the individual, the community, and our local society, and hopefully global via cross-platform integration. And in that light, I'm going to end on this, just an emphasis of something I consider very important. This is a grand concept, right? It's very big. I'd say words like global and societal. That's a possibility. What's most salient is our first steps, which are coming together with the games that we already have that we're trying to work on, and just helping each other make them and get them out there. Like, get anywhere from game design to testing to critique, development, but also marketing, production, distribution. These are all things we can work together to make more effective for each other as we go. So that's where I would start if this were to be followed through. And so from there, I'm going to close my speaking and open the floor for any interaction and Flurry.
I have been like going to board game meetup in Lisbon, which is like 1 hour from here. And yeah, I went there because what got nothing to do. But yeah, like we gotta start creating some forms of game, some interactioner board game
Mhm.
that is a meaningful board game that is fun to play, and also that's a way to attract the users and harvest the data from the users and feed it into the collective Liminal Commons brain. And AI is like sometimes it's fun to play games with AI. So that's also a thing. Yeah, I think board game is something fun to build with. Yes, yes.
I,
Sure.
I love that observance about the AI being potential data harvester, but for us, right? Like
Yeah.
using AI for digital gaming purposes so that we can do analytics across what we are doing and feed it into our database that we own and are in control of, as opposed to feed
Yes.
it into Xbox's analytics or into PlayStation's analytics. We would have our own means of doing vast scale analysis of interactions amongst our own development. You also mentioned something that I had forgotten to mention, that thank you very much, that making these games is to make them attractive to your general populace, to people who don't share this liminal background, don't have these same interests as us. This is a way of getting these ideas, these different methods of collaboration, co-creation, regenerativity into their hands so that they can get like a basis for it through play without it being um, proselytized, right? Without us standing on a pulpit and saying, you should do this. Instead, they get to play it out to their own satisfaction, their own innovation, and their own creativity, and potentially see the power of these approaches for themselves as a self-realized idea, which I think is a very powerful potential for these sorts of games. And until I hear any other questions or comments, those open. Something that me and the Project Township have been working on is a tabletop version of what's being discussed here of the iGame. It is currently in stasis because we were developing it, me and Jim, when we lived together, and we were playing it a lot at that time. But we moved apart, and so the live action component of it slowed down its development. But the idea was, well, okay, here's how we started doing it. He owns a bunch of board games. And what we did was we sort of cannibalized from each board game components of it. Like, oh, this is a great facet of this game, like Settlers of Catan. Right? You got these different, you lay out the board tiles so you have a different map every time. Like, oh, we have a deck of cards that are the map cards. So you lay those out and you have a new map every single play. Went to tarot. Oh, tarot has this like map of the psyche with all these different characters in it. We can use this tarot deck as the sets of characters that are active within the environment, as well as tarot has swords and wands and cups and discs, and started to use those as item implementations. Like, oh, well, there's Magic the Gathering. There's these different dynamics you can play with your cards that enable an evolution within the overall communal field of what's playing. So we have this environmental effect. And then there's resource cards, Dungeons and D&D, where you are telling a story as you play it. You are living the story, you're being the story. So like, okay, part of this is as the world develops and you create your characters and your societies and your religions and your economies, that you are actively narrating it with every move that you do. And as it's narrated, it's a co-narrated story that's emerging through it. As the world is built, as the society is built, as the different facets of society are developed individually, it must inevitably interconnect in some way and have this cascade effect upon each other. And what we found was that besides the fun of the game, there was an awesome story that we made that was an end product that could just become its own book even. Like every time there's this really novel, organic generativity of artistic output as a result. And that's something I would love to see revitalized as a potential project for people to come co-create around. And I will pause again for any other thoughts or shares or questions.
I want to reflect back like what I'm hearing or like the major arcs here. So would you mind, Florin, could you bring us to the first page? Thank you. Yeah. So like the key things here are like, so move the you're saying you're seeing an emerging meta, which is that that we get to choose the games that we play in, that we're playing. That's the player. That's what I see you like pointing at with the player developer non-duality. Right? That's a unity. It's one. We're one and the same. It's like it's an interesting one. It means that like we're not confined to the the games we socialized within. We get to choose the games that we play. We get to make the games that we want to play. Right. Next page. Thank you for it. And so I hear you speaking to like gameplay at different levels. That's a really interesting one. I think that like people in the liminal web like care about like gameplay like across these different dimensions and are often asking like how can we play different games so that we're able to get out of what people call the meta crisis or avoid collapse or something like that. And that's typically like questions about scalability. And so how are you asking like the question of like how can we play these design games and play them at these different levels. And then the next page, I was really intrigued and like what seems intuitive to me in this one is like, yes, like I get what you mean in terms of looking at liminal commons and like gather as a way of play testing our games. It's less intuitive to me, but it seems clear enough that like it's possible for me to view much of what's being experimented with and say in terms of say different governance or different collaborative things or different ways of relating and exploring relationality that those are like that can be viewed as like forms of like socio-technical games. And so in that way, like, I think I'm hearing the call as like, come bring your game, come, let's play one another's games and experiment with those, and this is a platform for that. That's what I'm reflecting, what I'm hearing.
Thank you for your reflection. That is resonant and consonant. Rizzard, I love that you changed your name to that.
That was for you, man. Hey, just listening in. It seems to me that this is just another component of trying to solve real-world problems with gameplay, because they're all addressing some kind of real-world issue or desire to connect, desire to play with each other, desire to solve real-world problems or improve critical thinking, collaborative thinking. And so they're addressing real-world problems. And so, for instance, one of the things I was thinking, I'm in the process of designing a cooperative house on our property. And it would be a lot easier if I could open that up as a game rather than as me going out and getting inputs from people and then trying to form it myself and then coming back to them again. It would be a lot more interesting if I could create some kind of collaborative space where everybody can co-architect the actual structure that we're building as a game. And then we actually build something from that evolution. So I'm seeing almost the game development collab as the theoretical side of building collectives in the actual in the rock and tree world, I guess, the physical world, as a way to play out those ideas, crunch numbers together, come up with consensus, and play around with those ideas together before we actually invest real capital into real things. Hope that resonates.
Just purely speculative, but off of that, so you have a community of people that are running an iGame together. and you have AI participating in that as a means of data analysis. You could have people playing these iterative games, have AI collecting the data, and those people who are building the most, say, dimensionally stable plan are elevated in visibility for that so that they are more seen by potential investors. And so it's not to deny others the capacity to be elevated, but it's just a means of showing those who are most dedicated to it, who are most open to critique and adaptation, those who have considered the most like necessary components will be given a more prominent display and more potential access to investment into their stuff. So just pure speculation there, but there's other ways of taking it.
No, I think that matters.
Mm-hmm.
I think that matters a hell of a lot. For instance, you know, we have a lot of visitors that come out to our intentional community that suggest things like, "Oh, you should do it this way, this way, this way." It's like, okay, these are all year-long experiments.
Yeah.
Are you willing to participate in these experiments? No. I just want to suggest things and leave. You know, so there's a commitment aspect to this as well. Like, what is the commitment level to the game that we're playing here in real life?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks. I really like this. There's another woman that I ran into. Her name is Ardell Broadbent. She's working. Yeah, okay. And then the other, I've got two more things. One is for us lucky ones who are in this liminal web space. This is an easy game. This is a game that we'd all like to play. I would love for this to be attractive to people who are not in this space, who need that to develop that skill, to hear other people, to take perspectives, to work together. That'd be really cool. That'd be totally awesome. But if it winds up being attractive to the liminal web folks, that's fine too. and then the second thing. So I want to encourage you on this. The second thing is something that Rizzard just spoke about, or maybe you and he riffed off this. If a community, let's say a community of that second vertical group that you showed on that slide, were somehow connected in a civic network to work on issues that were local issues, and they're working in nodes, small nodes, that seems really opportune for a gamification, where, like you said, people rise in, oh, this node over here is making really good suggestions. They should get recognized. They should be elevated. But any node in the network can be the root, like for any issue on any context. So it's a dynamic policy network where, oh, this node is doing really good work in this particular issue, in this context, or whatever. So there's some potential there too. I've been wanting to see that happen.
Thank you so much. Do you have more?
No, that's it. I just want to express. Yeah, I just wanted to gush.
I appreciate that very much. Now, I want to gush in return, because on your first point about the potential for access for outside populations who aren't already in the liminal web, so to speak, one of my personal desires is for this to become like a pedagogical platform, a system of education that can be offered potentially to charter schools or to universities, to come to this digital space from a safe distance and to learn from this variety of teachers in an ecological way. So it's not just siloed information. You go from one container, learn, but have a plug-in to another container. And so you can wander the whole landscape, gaining access to these different systems of knowledge and seeing how they ecologically connect and become part of a whole world view. And I that'd be very powerful.
Yeah, beautiful. I think you're right to identify young people.
Yeah, they are our future.
Yeah, and they seem to be more open. And more awareness of what's really going on. But once people get to my age, we're a little more fossilized, I have to say.
Yes, but full of wisdom at the same time.
There you go. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And so then on the issue that would more relate to us that are growing in our years, that you brought up about the civic network of addressing local issues in these smaller nodes as basically like a policy consilience process of, say, just in the state of California, which I reside within, there's so much disconnection in like grassroots movement to scale. All these people very focused on local issues, but these are ecologically related. In Northern California, they're pumping all their water to Southern California. In Southern California, they have a wide variety of their own sociological issues that these things interrelate. So if there were special interest groups that could act as a root, as an anchor for how like the consilience of perspective is in their local environment, and then what proposals they make, what sort of initiatives they're founding, and how these things can cross interrelate so that as they elevate in something that can address the whole state's ecological connection, then the whole state gains access to seeing those who've got the most presentable, stable initiatives, and thus can provide voting power to these things as well.
Yeah, because I think there are people in these nodes that are bridgers. They can connect the, like say, the different bioregions. So yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Wizard?
Yeah, the game model is very much like a simulator. You don't put somebody necessarily in an airplane until they've got many hours of simulation practice. So before you plug something into real world, you've gone through the simulation and you've shown a certain level of aptitude before you can move into a level of actual planning. I mean, I think that's the point of education, is to be able to play in a simulation, philosophical simulation game before real world applications. So, yeah.
That is a language that Project Township used a lot in our working with this game ourselves, was the simulation. That it's like a concept incubator, so that we have these ideas, these creative concepts we want to bring to market, so to speak, just to the market of ideas that other people could utilize, that we run these simulations with ourselves until they work for all of us. Then we can scale up the experiment a notch to run them with other individuals and other groups, and then ratchet that up a notch until it's hit a certain level of experimental validity that now we can offer this to the world as something to potentially scale. And I see a hand from Arthur.
Yeah, or I don't know if you said this, a game that could help companies build to build teams around shared vision or values, and where all the members can play in the game to create that instead of just being a top down.
Yes, I love this. I was studying business administration before I switched to psychology, and at least that's what they were promoting in my classes, was the idea that there does appear to be a shift in the way that a lot of businesses are showing up. And this is part of this old meta, new meta concept of flattening the hierarchy, so you don't just have this like hierarchical top-down pyramid where you've got your C-suite of executives at the very top that are distributing through middle management these directives, and then those on the bottom just carry them out. But rather there's interest groups at the so-called bottom that are closer to the middle. So it's removing a lot of that middle management and having there be this like direct relationship between the executives and those participating. And this is part of the company design of vision for all parts and actually shaping outcome and policy within the company. But then there's new company ideas, like how to build cooperative and collective companies that just get rid of potentially the C-suite of executives and like everyone's an owner. And this was a big part of Victor's presentation on the Liminal Commons, is that this is potentially an economic engine in which all people participating in it who desire that can start to like profit from it and thrive and share their gifts as they go, and not in a way that there is an owner, but rather we are all owners of this economic engine, and we are all receiving generativity in that way, and we are all contributing through our groups towards the development of the vision. And so this is, yes, I agree. There's lots of potential there. Arthur?
Yeah, even though if it doesn't set the standard, it could still help bring teams together.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't need to be the biggest idea off the bat. Like the world is made of local relationships, I would say, and that's the most potent unit of social development and personal development that we can engage in, is bringing the small groups together so that they can run their own iGames in that way. And I also want to note that me nor my group, or really any of us, I don't think, have the answers. Like, to me, this is one of the most potent thing about this potential experiment, is we can come together to collectively pursue the answers and to develop these systems to be most effective for all of us.
Yeah, I really love this. It feels similar to a policy I wrote when I ran for office regarding basic needs, and how once people have their basic needs, their life opens up to be more gamified. You know, it's like everything else is an adventure after you know where your food is coming. You know, so I would love to see maybe like how we can take that policy and this platform, this gamification platform, and mix the two together to see if we can't make the language more attractive.
That policy is a beautiful policy, by the way, because the mind just can't be open to adventure if it must focus on feeding its belly. And if we have a population of people that are hungry and starving, then they're not paying attention to what the developers are doing so much as how to feed themselves.
Right.
If there's a system that separates themselves from sustenance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, plus I'm presenting that policy to tonight, actually, like in an hour and a half. So 6:30, everybody must come to.
Are you presenting that at Limicon?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I will see you there. Yeah, I love that. And I just the idea of that combination of political policy into the gamification of like, well, we're saying let's play this iGame, but there's all these people that are like, how do I feed myself? How are they going to play this game unless they get fed? How do we game in such a way that feeds them, so that they can join us in the game and we can all elevate together? I see a wizard hand.
Yeah, when I was looking over the calendar, I saw Victor's thing, your thing, and Fahim's thing, and I was like, oh, it seemed like you had coordinated all three, because they do dovetail very nicely into a evolving discussion. And I almost felt like it was intentional. So it's very interesting to find out that it wasn't now. But I do think that all these pieces dovetail very nicely, as far as taking it from a liminal space and having a gaming action around it, and then turning it into a real world application, as Fahim's trying to suggest, I believe. Mm-hmm. But I also wanted to point out that that failure is a big part of this learning curve. And I mean, I'm trying to do a real world application here with intentional community. And I'm looking for people like you, Ainra, who have lived in it, in one that's failed. And I want to learn from that failure to obviously avoid and evolve past that, because I feel like so often we get very close to something and then we just kind of give up and we lose all this tons of experiential knowledge that just goes down the toilet. And we go, well, it failed, but we don't go back and examine how we can improve the life game. So we squander a lot of that wisdom, I think.
Also, I saw Anra's thing because I only posted about this inch workers model like I think it was Tuesday after I saw Anra's thing and Victor's thing. So I intentionally put it at the end of it, looking at what was coming up, because I didn't want to take a space that was already taken. Plus, I was already looking back to see what was on the agenda. So my thing came later. I don't know if Victor and Ira had coordinated together, but
Well, actually, I was scheduled for the time slot that Victor was scheduled for, and he said, "Well, I would like to do that." And I was like, "Well, your thing is more important than my thing, so you take that," and I bump mine back as a consequence. So it was kind of this serendipitous alignment of presentation that, and I'm going to borrow some from the language of your monastery, Fahim, that, and I may use it poorly, so please correct me if I do, that we are people who are following our attractors, our attractions. And we are looking at the wilderness and seeing the patterns there and coming into communion with it. And the thing that moves inside of us is guiding us towards these areas of influence by which we can be our most authentic self most fully. So potentially our attractors that we cannot see in entirety are in an alignment right here that we just followed it and it brought us into this succession of serendipitous, like one after another to build a powerful series of presentation.
right on. Yeah, in this case, we wouldn't be reflective of the wilderness, but we would be reflective of this ecosystem, this digital ecosystem, in such a way that being reflective of it made that make sense.
Now, I saw Jim raise a hand, put it down. So before I open to Stefan, I want to see if Jim wanted to join.
I guess I wanted the conversation went a different direction, but I just wanted to note for the experience processing. This is mostly to Jim Rizard, that the affordance for failure and what to do with it. You talked about it briefly there. But I think that's very critical to this, and it ties back to the languaging, the analogies that we use to do the expressions of those failures, because each of us has an experience, but not all of us can speak that experience to others in a meaningful way, nor to themselves. And so having these useful tensioned analogies, such as the township, character sheets or avatars, experience gain, all these gamification analogies tie together the notions we've been talking about in a way that makes them accessible in your mind to just think iGame, think game, think character, think shadows, think the set of words that just brings you back to the ability to have the tension, the ability to hold those experiences of failure and what you got out of them and what you personally experienced from that and what others experienced from that, and express it to each other. So, like you said, Jim, it was missing. You found that it was missing. You didn't go back and process that experience to the degree where we learn really what happened. And I think that's a common thing that doesn't happen individualistically and as a society. We do some forensic analysis, but it's not often on a personal level or with little endeavors that we do this. It's not common, I find, in that respect. So I wanted to note for that this gamification comes with a kind of a finalization to it, which is the last step of processing what you learned from the adventure you just had. You have to turn it into something. You have to cash it in. It has to become something that is useful to you, a new rule, a new piece of armor, a new item, whatever it is. It has to have some spirit that you've gained to put into that. And if you don't have like a document with all of your failures written on it, so you don't make those failures again. You haven't written it out, it hasn't been artifacted. You might lose some of that. So there's an importance to the amount of how you process that experience. And I just wanted to note for that. Anyway, Stefan, I think you were next.
So it's just complementary, so maybe I can interfere. So it's one that also was what Jim said. There is experience of failure, and we want to learn about it. And right now we are in some meta discussion. We are having some meta discussion about some game, but the question is how we can get into the game. That means that we do not only have some meta discussion, but we start right now to play, and the meta discussion maybe will be part of the game. So the specific question might be, how do we start? What is the next step? Is there some timeline? So maybe what we want to need is some gamification community. That means some community which just tests out the games. So what I heard just in this community is there are a couple of suggestions of games which are not really tested. That means, so maybe the first approach is not to develop many more games, but those games which are out there, just test them and just get started. And this is my main concern. What is the take-off of this meeting right now or the other meeting of FIME later on? Do we have a follow-up? Maybe right now, not necessary, but maybe afterwards, FIME, we have some schedule, we have some date, maybe some regular weekly meeting where we build up the gamification community and say, okay, each Monday this time, who has time may join, and we just play the game. We have each week another game, and who is able to join joins, and then we just have 2 hours to play the game and have the meta discussion within the game as a suggestion.
That was conciliant on so many levels, as that was the concluding slide of the presentation earlier, was let's make a guild of game and let's run it here, and not have the answers yet, but the first answer is, do we want to play this game? And let's show up and do it and test it and run it and all those things. So I hope to see you there, Stefan. Stefan, thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that maybe the failure in the real world can back inform the game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we tested this out in the real world. This is where it fell apart. This is where philosophy and application did not line up. And so the philosophy needs to be reinformed. Tried that, been there, done that. What's the next basket of possibilities that we can pull from? I oftentimes call, initially when we started our project here at EcoShire, I called this a sandbox, an adult-sized sandbox, right? Where I could take like different things I was learning about on YouTube and like, oh, okay, this guy's saying you can build this out of this material. Oh, let's try it. We do it, spend 3 weeks on it, $1,000 or whatever. Oh, it's not working out so well. You know, and then where do we take that information and backfeed it to the educational piece, to the I mean, I've got ruins of YouTube suggestions all over the property. Like you were saying, you lived in a hobbit house, and you were talking about how tarantulas infiltrated it on the regular, and how the back wall leaked and washed out regularly. I mean, that kind of should inform the educational side of what works as far as using organic materials in this game space. So that way, if we're creating this, the Liminal Commons, and we're able to create this utopia where we're all building a hempcrete into a hillside and it looks like this, you know, and then you go, wait a minute, if you try doing that in the real world, the back wall is going to flood in every time it rains. You're going to have all these critters moving in with you. And, you know, hey, you can try it and you can try it in the simulation, but you're going to wake up with a tarantula behind your pillow, just like Reed did when he was 7 years old. You know, so you're going to get feedback in the game that mirrors the actual life experience.
Hi, Kevin.
Maybe. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole hope is that we are in the game. We're in life. Life is this thing from this philosophical lens. But the philosophy is a set of knowledge systems that hopefully can inform people on the ground. And the people on the ground can adapt the set of knowledge systems through practical applications, studying what works, what fails, sharing it effectively with each other, having a ranker system of effectiveness within context of certain applications that all people have access to and can consistently update, and it will continue to fluctuate in regards to how well it can be implemented real time.
Right. Like the other piece that I think is huge is like, oh, I'd like to implement this into the plan. And when somebody suggests that, my mind immediately goes to, when I'm thinking about planning here on ground level, and somebody makes a suggestion, my mind immediately goes to cost. How much time is that going to take? How many resources are going to be necessary? What's the bottom line? And then, and what kind of return are we going to get out of that, et cetera? And I want that to go back and inform that opinion and say, yeah, we can do that. However, there are consequences and there are material requirements to do that kind of imagining. And so it kind of, it helps to set prioritizing for real world applications within the gaming or theoretical philosophical realm.
Yes, locked in. I love it. I want to note that we're past our hour we were allotted for. And so I'm going to formally close the container, but that doesn't mean we can't just stay and kick it and keep talking and be productive and generative to whatever degree we desire. Thank you all so much for showing up in your time. And in that note, I am not in a facilitator position any longer, and it's just a circle of people sharing their views as they see fit. And I guess I will hit stop on the recording for now, unless anyone has thoughts they want to add to it before the end, as this will be posted to the Limicon playlist.
Can we actually calendar another gathering in this context?
Thank you. This was the initial plan, was just like, let's do a very general, let's get together and talk about it. And then as Stefan, is that the correct pronunciation? Brought forward is like, well, what's our next step? Like, well, let's not just meta talk, let's do. Like, the hope was that if there's enough interest, that the next step would be another container, practical implementation. What do we got to do to make this a solid thing that we can continue developing over time? So I will create another event that is centered around this topic about moving forward and like setting up a plan to do that practically.
Well, I will say, I just want to say thank you, Reed, very much for a very strong facilitator role in this. Very, very well done, I will say. Yeah, much appreciated, sir. I know we work together a lot, but I must point out you did a fantastic job hosting this. So thank you very much.
To the heart, thank you very much. I was very nervous when I started. I was like, oh my God, this is a big task. I don't know if I could do it. and I didn't do it. We did it. And that's the important note. And I did play a part, though, and I appreciate you noting that, Jim, very much. All right, recording done.